Tony Abbott, elected in a landslide in 2013, promising to repeal Julia Gillard's dreaded carbon tax, and of course he did. And now, rather than tell you they've put one back in, the Albanese government's joined with the states and done it all by stealth. That's the verdict in a new report from the Centre for Independent Studies that has exposed this new carbon price introduced last year at $66 a tonne, which by way of comparison is more than double the price of the old Gillard-era carbon tax. For more on this, I'm joined by one of the lead authors of the report, Energy Policy Director at the CIS, Aidan Morrison. Aidan, welcome. I'm almost getting palpitations going back to carbon taxes. I dealt with it for so long in opposition and then government. I think a lot of viewers would be really surprised to know this is happening. Explain how this new carbon tax or pricing mechanism actually works.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, this is a little bit convoluted, actually. They don't call it a tax. They've avoided doing that. They call it a value on emissions reductions. And that gives you a hint as to how it actually works. You see, normally a tax sort of penalises you directly for emitting more carbon in this case. So if you burn some petrol in your car or you consume some sort of coal-fired electricity, you pay a little bit extra on your bill for that emission right there and then. This one's quite different. And the hint is that it's in a value. They've basically created an incentive where they can pay more money to private companies for their proposals to reduce your emissions indirectly. So that means that transmission companies and distribution companies, if they can come up with larger projects that cost more money, that they believe will reduce carbon emissions eventually by inducing you, for example, to go and buy an electric car or consume less electricity, or for more wind farms and solar farms to be built, they can basically raise the money for that project in confidence, knowing they can send the bill straight to the consumer. So it gets added to your electricity price now after they propose a big project to try to change the way that electricity is generated in Australia.
So hang on, you're giving us the correlation between this pricing mechanism, let's call it that, it's simpler than their nomenclature, and the pass-through to consumers. You've done a bit of modelling on that, the way in which it will hit our power bills. Tell us more.
That's right. So what this does is it opens the floodgates to new proposals. We don't know exactly how fast they'll come in, but if enough proposals came in straight away, the power prices could rise about $850 per year on the average household bill. Now, we know that all the projects to abate away our emissions won't come in instantly. In practice, they are going to come in slowly over the next 5-10 years perhaps, but the longer they're delayed, the higher the ceiling goes, so the more that prices can actually increase. So if all the projects were approved in, say, 15 years' time, it could be more like a $1,300 increase on electricity bills. So what we're likely facing is a gradual ramp up in electricity prices that could see electricity prices something not quite double, but something like that under this proposal if new proposals are found to try to abate emissions through this mechanism.
And of course, this is on top of all the other money we're going to pay as a pass-through on renewables. You know, the cost of all these new transmission towers and lines going out there and solar panels and wind farms and all the other stuff that's coming into the network. This is an addition to all of that, isn't it?
Well, there's some complexity there. There's a kind of a smorgasbord of different mechanisms that have been introduced now. And in this case, this one is kind of the mechanism they're going to use to make all those transmission lines and distribution, potentially neighbourhood batteries, community batteries they call them, all those things that struggle to pass the economic balance test at the moment, because the old system said you had to build the system, the cheapest system that was safe and reliable. Now we can build a more expensive system for that. There's also other mechanisms such as the capacity investment scheme, which is an unknown subsidy for the wind farms and solar farms. So there's now a whole array of different instruments, none of which have a very clear maximum price tag associated with them, that are being used to kind of insert incentives to build more renewables, more infrastructure in different parts of the system. So it seems as though the systems are complex, and I think that's what's being used often to try to hide what the true impact is on consumer wallets. That's why we tried to add up what this particular instrument could potentially amount to for consumers.
Look, you are spot on that point, Aidan, because I remember with the RUD CPRS, the carbon price reduction scheme, carbon pollution reduction scheme, which was the forerunner to the Gillard carbon tax. The language behind it, the modelling was opaque. It was all deliberately designed so that most average people and even most, average political staffers and policy people put it down too hard to understand. They do the complex by design to make it as hard to understand as possible. Now, what I'm interested here, though, lack of transparency. When pushed on this stuff, Chris Bowen always says, commercial in confidence, I'm not going to put the modelling out there. But in this case, we didn't even get legislation, did we? This was all done backdoor with regulation.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. It's very strange because officially the states have control of the energy markets. So there's some legislation to introduce the objective, just the objective to reduce emissions that went through the South Australian Parliament, because that's just the Parliament that we happen to do our electricity laws in. But the actual price that was set, which is basically says how we're going to balance up the objective with having low power prices with reducing emissions, that was done without any parliamentary debate whatsoever. In fact, the regulator said specifically that it was in the hands of the ministers to decide on whether they consult on this, and they chose not to. It was just introduced simply with no opportunity for any public consultation, even through the regulatory process. So that set of numbers now that starts at $70 and goes to $420 per tonne has been determined without any parliamentary scrutiny or even any consultation in the regulatory process.
It's shocking. Head to the CIS website if you want to read more. All the details are there. Aidan, you're a braver man than I to get down into the weeds with all of those numbers and to work out what's happening here. But I tell you what, it is shocking. Thank you for your time.